this seminar is, an interesting one, carved out of a large research project conducted at Makerere University and sponsored by Makerere University together with the government of Uganda, and led by the speaker whom I'm going to introduce in a moment and his team. On an interesting topic of contactless digital financial innovation and the global contagious COVID-19 pandemic in low-income countries with evidence from Uganda. And the presenter today is a very distinguished colleague and a friend of mine who's been very, very active in research circles, especially based at Makerere, but also participating in many parts of the world. He has been to SOAS to visit the Center for Global Finance, and he has also participated in many conferences here in the UK. But also we meet in the circles on the US conferences on entrepreneurship finance. And that is Dr. George Okello Candiya Bongomin. I always have a nickname for him as a young professor. Because of his prolific nature, he's so prolific, working 24/7. And in a short series of time, he's published so much work that I really can't believe how he does it, okay? But George holds a PhD in finance with a focus on financial inclusion, and an MSc in accounting and finance, and a BCom degree, all from Makerere University. He is currently a research fellow at the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research at Makerere University Business School. He is also a visiting scholar at Kigali Independent University in Rwanda. So he's so active guy. I don't know whether he takes a flight, but in the morning he's conducting a research group or teaching in Kampala, and in the evening he's also teaching and conducting next door in a neighboring country in Rwanda. That's how he demands indeed an East African way of participating in this. And he's been prolific all the time, published about 35 articles in good journals. And he has a very attractive area of research that spans across financial inclusion, digital financial services, micro, small, and medium enterprises, development finance, behavioral finance, banking and finance practices, institutional economics, financial consumer protection, and business psychology. He has a good flair of working with the many individuals in teams and across disciplines. He has a multidisciplinary kind of catch where he brings in finance, but also works with colleagues in areas like psychology. And what is unique about his research is also the application of mixed methods, whereby he's comfortably plays around with a lot of secondary data, but also he has great affinity with invoking primary data instruments and going out in the field to collect some data. So here he is today, sharing with us the preliminary outputs from this huge project funded by Makerere University Government of Uganda to look into COVID-19 issues, in particular, how contactless digital financial innovation has fared with in Uganda since the outbreak of COVID-19. George, we are so much delighted to have you here, and we just can't wait. Please go ahead and share with us your research work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor, for the wonderful presentation. It's a pleasure to meet all colleagues during this seminar. Actually, I'm really honored to meet all people who are attending this seminar tonight, this evening.
Yeah, it's showing, yes, you are sharing the screen of the first page, but we can't hear you. Oh, that's okay. Page number 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
All right.
that's,
Yeah. Thank you very
fine.
much, Victor. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. This study looked at the use of digital financial innovation and global contagious and COVID-19 pandemic in low-income countries. So basically, we looked at the use of mobile money, how mobile money has been useful, especially when the SOPs were instituted in many countries. So briefly, we are well aware that economies everywhere have suffered from the shocks that have been caused by COVID-19, and this has resulted into a number of implementation of SOPs that was recommended by the World Health Organization to flatten the curves in order to avoid death from the novel coronavirus. Specifically, you find that a number of SOPs were taken up and implemented by economies across. For example, lockdown and curfew. And this resulted into closure of most of the businesses in most of the economies. For example, you find that the traditional bank branches were closed down. This caused some sort of disturbance to the households by actually causing some sort of financial exclusion, and households were left without access to financial services. Yet you find that finance is the lifeblood of every household. Therefore, there was dire need for some kind of strategy that could promote access to financial services, especially for households at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, there was need for some kind of innovation that could allow individuals to access financial services remotely so that they can actually meet their daily basic needs like procuring food and other and things like medicine. So we found that digital financial services like mobile money could be really very important in promoting access to financial services during the time of COVID-19. And this one factored into the issue of financial inclusion, where you find that financial inclusion aims at leaving no one behind at any specific time in life, even if it is during pandemic or without pandemic. So we thought it wise that when you adopt the use of contactless digital financial services like mobile money, people can actually stay away from each other by observing probably social distancing, and even during lockdown where people are not allowed to work or to come out of their homes, it could really help them to procure food from the groceries. Mobile money is important because it is safe, efficient, and it's convenient because people save money or store money in their phones, and they can actually send and also make payments and receive remittances. So you could find that during lockdown, such kind of platform could be useful to meet financial needs of households. Now, the rationale for this study were fourfold. One, the study intended to assess whether contactless digital financial services like mobile money can promote financial inclusion under situation of pandemics. For example, when the SOPs were instituted, and then also to assess whether digital financial inclusion innovation can, alongside inclusion, can actually promote what we call the SOPs to avoid actually people from catching, to prevent the spread of COVID and avoid, and people, household to avoid catching the coronavirus. And then also to assess whether we have what we call positive emotions. So during pandemics, when individuals face shocks, taking into consideration issues of psychology, psychologically, the individual's mindset tend to actually look towards preventive measures. So factoring in and being cognizant to psychological factors. We also wanted to assess whether positive emotions among individuals promoted the use of contactless digital financial innovation like mobile money. In this case, we wanted to test if individuals' positive emotion prompted them to actually adopt and use mobile money, or to actually increase the use of mobile money at the onset or during the coronavirus, and then to make suggestions to policy. So the methodology that was adopted in this study was cross-sectional, taking into consideration the current pandemic situation where households have been locked down and all this kind of situation. We found it wise that a cross-sectional survey that could help us to collect a large amount of data within the shortest period was feasible. And then the data were collected from all the 4 regions in Uganda based on enumeration maps, which was used by Uganda Bureau of Statistics during the 2014 census. So our main participants in this study were the mobile money users, and then the authorized mobile money agents who actually found at different points. And then this category of participants were selected using simple random kind of sampling. And then the data were collected by about 20 research assistants who were under supervision of about 4 field staff. Now, we decided to adopt some kind of remote software, which was actually installed on iPads and then on iPads and smartphones. And this is a software that is called Kobo Collect. It can actually collect data remotely, and this one was taken into consideration because of the SOPs of social distancing and actually to avoid physical contact. And the data were collected over a period of 60 days. And we managed, through the hard times of coronavirus, we managed to actually get over 2,700 and we managed to collect 2,737 responses. And this really impressed us a lot, because we thought that since mobile money usage is cast across the different regions, to get some kind of generalization, we expected to at least hit over 1,000 kind of responses. So that's what prompted us to at least elicit over about 2,737 responses. Now, our major findings were as follows. One, we found that mobile money usage is still skewed towards the male than female. So during this study, we also found that more of the mobile money usage is within the urban centers, leaving out the peri-urban and then the rural areas. Now, this shows that the penetration could be probably within the urban centers, not actually going deeper into the villages. And then we also found that the millennials, the generation Y, that cohort, which is between 26 to 33 years old, were actually the majority of people who are transacting on mobile money within this period of 3 months when there was lockdown, the 90 days when there were lockdown in Uganda. And then also, our results also showed that the use of mobile money is still actually leaning towards the more educated. The lowly educated people, probably like people who have not gone to school, the primary school leavers, do not actually, the uptake of mobile money is still low. And then during this period, we also found out that most of the mobile money activities was with withdrawals of money from the different mobile money accounts. Majority of the households that participated indicated that most of the services that they accessed during the 3 months was with withdrawal. Now, this indicated to us that there could have been some kind of local remittances from relatives among themselves, and then some sort of also international transfer through international remittances. And then we also found that there was increase actually in mobile money usage. In fact, 99% of the mobile money agents and even the users attested to the fact that there was actually an increase in the usage of mobile money. And also, the mobile money agents indicated that the float levels that they had on their mobile money accounts to give to the users actually was very high within the 3 months. So during lockdown and during the curfew hours, you find that mobile money demand went up. So these were our major findings. We found that during COVID time, mobile money was actually used to access payment services, savings, credits, and remittances. And this actually improved the welfare of the different households during the 3 months when there was lockdown in Uganda. We also found that individuals had some kind of psychological mindset where they had what we call outlook towards adopting measures that could prevent them from catching the diseases. So they took responsibility as much as possible to satisfy their needs, but also observing the SOPs. Now, this prompted them to adopt mobile money to actually do shopping from groceries and then also to pay for medicine which were procured from the different pharmacies. We also found out that because of the positive feelings that individuals had, there was some kind of affection towards different ways, including adoption of technology and different kind of strategies that could really prevent them from catching the coronavirus. So our findings were actually derived from the following statistic. One of the issues that we tested was to test actually if the items that we used for investigating our study were actually reliable and valid. And we had to adopt the use of PLS, smart PLS, and we tested for the construct validity for the different items that we used for measuring the different variables. First of all, we looked at what we call the pandemic mitigation measures that were actually linked to the SOPs recommended by World Health Organization. Now, from our loadings, you could clearly see that most of the items were above the 0.7 rule of thumb that were recommended by field and air. And then also when you look at our alpha coefficient, you find that they're above the 0.7 cutoff points and rule of thumb. And then also when you look at the overall contribution of each of the key factors, you find that about 36% of the pandemic mitigation measures contributed actually to adoption of mobile money amidst the use of, amidst the presence of pandemic positive emotion. You find that pandemic positive emotion, which people had developed because of fear and all that, contributed to about 2.8% towards adoption of contactless digital financial services, because this prevented them from actually going into contact with different kind of people, and then also social distancing. So you find that because of that kind of positive emotion, which drives technology adoption and usage, there was actually, it boosted adoption and use of mobile money by 2.8%. And also we tested for discriminant validity between the different items and then the variables. You find that the inter-item correlations were actually below the diagonal figures for the different constructs. And then also the factor loadings based on actually between the different testing the inter-variable correlations and then the factor loadings. You could clearly see that most of these items closely loaded well, and hence giving us a better kind of results that predicted the positive kind of effect on financial inclusion. We also tested, what were the contribution of each of these factors as far as the T values and the P values were concerned. You'll find that most of the factors that were used, or the items that were used to establish the effect of each of the items, the variables that we used were actually above the 1.95, which was recommended by et al. And then you look at the P values, they were actually significant. All the items were significant, hence giving us a significant result. And then the VRF figures were also above the recommended of above the recommended by et al, which should be less than 3.0. And then the results of the hypothesis testing, we found that when people use digital financial services, it actually promotes pandemic motivation, pandemic mitigation factors, like when people adopt mobile money, you find that the SOPs are observed better than when people are not using the mobile money. So you'll find that the use of digital financial innovation, like mobile money, promoted the SOPs, which were termed as the mitigation measures. And you'll find that the coefficient, it was actually about 5.6%. So the use of mobile money could actually predict or explain mitigation measures by 5.6%. And then also we found out that there was a relationship between the digital financial services, adoption of mobile money, and then the positive emotions. Positive emotion resulted into actually adoption and use of mobile money, which prevented Ugandans from catching coronavirus, since they had to remain indoors and they could actually perform transactions using their mobile phones. And then also we found that when you introduce, when the positive emotions of an individual comes into play, it prompts them, they get some kind of mindset and affection. And then they decide to actually try to find strategies or preventive ways of not catching coronavirus. So through that, we found that when you introduce some kind of psychological mindset, which in and then blend it with the finance, we find that this increased adoption of mobile money by 3.6%. And this is really very, very good, because you can clearly see that for people to adopt usage of technology, we need to bring into play psychological factors. And also, after testing for all these other statistics, we also established the predictive relevance of our model. And we found out that how relevant was when you introduce digital financial, contactless digital financial services during the time of pandemics. We found out that when you use mobile money, pandemic mitigation measures could actually improve by about 36%. This actually brought about some kind of people, when they adopted mobile money, it actually helped the Ministry of Health to help people to actually adhere to the SOPs. And then also pandemic positive emotion raised up, and you would clearly see that the use of mobile money interacted with the pandemic positive emotion, and you could clearly see that the validity of our model could be explained by 2.8%. This clearly proved that the validity of the model met the rule of thumb, which is actually stated by et al. And then the effect size, we also tested for effect size, since we were considering two other exogenous variables. We found out that when positive emotion is included into the model, you find that the total effect rose to about 21.5%. And then also, we found out that when digital financial inclusion is included into the model, about 16.9% of the SOPs could actually, it could increase the SOPs by about 16.9%. So all these came out from a model that we constructed through the PLS, where we tried to see the direct effect of mobile money adoption on SOPs. And then we also factored in the pandemic positive emotions. Now, we found out that when you factor in pandemic positive emotion, this explains about 36% of the pandemic mitigation measures, implying that when people adopt mobile money through developing some kind of mindset that helps them to prevent catching deadly diseases like COVID, then this can actually, in essence, promote what we call the pandemic mitigation measures by 36%. And then also we try to look at the PLSM through the T values and the P values. We could clearly see that our test results were significant and all the P values were actually less than 0. So the conclusion from this study were derived from both the preliminary findings and then the major findings under this study. We found out that women still face some kind of exclusion from digital financial services or digital financial inclusion through mobile money. And this could be explained by several factors. You might find that culture still prevents some people or women or households from actually having or owning handsets and then transacting using the same handset. Or you could find that a household head, like a man, could be owning a handset, and then the women within the household use this kind of handset. And then we also found out that the millennials still use the mobile money more than the other section of the population. Probably because they are taking a survey, because they know how to use the mobile money menu, and also they know how to play around with the phone better than the older generation, like the traditionalists and then the baby boomers. So probably that could be the factor. And then we also found out that people with low education still do not use mobile money more than people who can read and write, or people who have gone to school. Probably it could be explained by the mobile money network operators. Most of the services that are offered through mobile money is actually in English. It's not translated into the different languages. So there could be some kind of difficulty in actually navigating the mobile money menu for the people who have not gone to school. So we also found out that mobile money usage is common around within the urban areas. Probably this could be explained by the quality of the network coverage, because you find that within the villages or in the deeper rural areas, mobile money is not being used because some kind of network interference disrupts the kind of transaction that are performed through mobile money. And then also we found that mobile money is used for payment, savings, credit, and remittances to improve the welfare of the household members. And then from our major findings, we found out that first there was positive kind of outlook towards protection. Individuals took it upon themselves to protect themselves from catching the coronavirus. Now, this helped them to adopt some kind of remote kind of technology that would help them not to go into the community to meet other people. So people tended to remain indoors and they could perform transactions using their mobile handset. And then also we discovered that during some kind of shock that is caused either by pandemics, earthquakes, and any other kind of shock, people tend to develop some kind of emotion. And this kind of emotion gives them some kind of mindset to search for any possible means of protecting themselves. So we found out that the positive emotion that was cultivated into people due to coronavirus resulted into search for different kind of strategies or means or ways to actually to avoid the catching of the virus. And overall, we found out that when positive emotion now comes into play, individuals tend to actually take up certain kind of strategies, or they take certain kind of steps to actually adopt the available strategies to avoid catching deadly diseases like coronavirus. So the following are our implications. We think that this kind of study can contribute to policy. One, in the following ways: it could help public public health campaigns where individuals can be sensitized to use some kind of contactless means to transact during condition of or situation of lockdown or situation of pandemics that are contagious. So the public health sector can adopt this kind of study to explain to the community or to the population that, look here, when you adopt technology which can promote some kind of remote kind of transaction, then you can avoid catching diseases which are contagious. Then we also think that this kind of study can help government to digitize and also promote use of this technology, digital technology across the different sectors. It could be used and can be nationalized to access payments across the payments and then remittances, and its use across the different sectors to access goods and services. So we thought that if government could nationalize the use of contactless digital innovation like mobile money, it could actually promote government to person payments where we have individuals like the old people or the terminally sick people, the retirees, because government has what we call the monthly remittances to people who have retired, like they have their pension. So this kind of platform can help in time of limited movement caused by health restriction. And then also we thought that this kind of platform can help to promote what we call person-to-person payments, and then person-to-person business, and then business to person. Now this can promote what we call some kind of transaction where individuals can procure goods and services over the technology like mobile phone. And in essence, this can promote what we call digital commerce. Actually, it can also be used even if there are no shocks like pandemics that can restrict movements. So we thought that adoption and use of mobile money can actually promote digital commerce. And then we also thought that digitizing health services could actually help during this time of coronavirus. You find that, if, for example, in Uganda, people who are healed, who are suffering, for example, from diabetes, HIV patients, there were actually stockouts in most of the health centers. And you could find that such kind of people rent out of their drugs. So government, in a way, can use mobile money to pay health service providers. For example, you can pay the health service providers to give medicine to these kind of individuals. And then we also greatly think that since Bank of Uganda has taken over mobile money issues, beginning with yesterday, the Bank of Uganda took over the management of mobile money transaction in Uganda. We greatly advise that taxes on mobile money should really be revised down, should be removed, because then it will put a big impediment to financial inclusion. Yet the use of digital platform like mobile money actually has shown progress in universal financial inclusion. For example, when you look at statistics from the latest World Bank Global Index of 2017, you'll find that the number of adults greatly increased basically because of mobile money. From 2014 to 2017, you find that about 24% increase in the number of individuals that own accounts. And this was basically because of platforms like the mobile money. And then also we still strongly advise the government, and we advocate for actual protection, consumer protection over the mobile money. You find that there has been a lot of frauds in Uganda about the mobile money issue. We find, and the money goes to suspend accounts. You find we have what we call misdirected transfers, where individuals erroneously can remit money to wrong numbers. And this money goes on to the suspense account of the mobile network operators. And that is a source of fraud. So government through policymakers and then regulators like the central bank should greatly look into this. That one, the data issue of data protection, data of the users of mobile money should actually be greatly protected. Actually, we suggest that the government of Uganda and government in low-income countries should have what we call a ombudsman who could actually be the observer of mobile money platform, actually the mobile money ecosystem. Then, because that would prevent what issues of connivance between the different stakeholders. And then we also recommend that the mobile money network operators or the designers of these mobile money financial services should actually rethink and try to design some kind of customized financial services that can help people during shocks, like which could restrict shocks that can restrict movements. Now, this is a clear indication. You could clearly see that the SOPs that were recommended by World Health Organization prevented movements and then also physical or social distancing, physical contact, social distancing, and all that. So we would think that this is the right time for mobile network operators and the designers and innovators of the digital platform, financial system, or the fintech technology to actually take up on this, to capitalize on it as actually some kind of a way that they can try to capitalize on this, and then they get back to try to redesign some kind of financial services that are a bit actually that have no stringent or impediments like cost and all of that. That can actually be helpful. Leave that alone, not only during pandemics, because for example in Uganda we have had issues of earthquakes, we have had landslides like in the eastern part of Uganda, floods in the western part of Uganda, where there are no movements. So mobile money becomes so critical. So what kind of product is on market that can help during this kind of circumstances? So we really strongly advise the mobile money inventors to look into this kind of issue. And then we also think that it is very prudent at this time for government through the central bank and other structures to look into issue of digital financial literacy. Now, because majority of the population are still actually illiterate in the use of the platform. So government should look into issues of rolling out the digital financial literacy alongside the financial literacy programs, so that individuals are actually familiar and they can effectively navigate the mobile money menu. And through this, a number of issues can be sorted out, like misdirected transaction, wrong pins. Individuals can actually change their pins to avoid hackers and all this. And this can actually result into increased level of financial inclusion, cheaply and conveniently. So basically, that is what we have for policy. And then we also had some kind of limitation during this study. Basically, one of the issues is the study focused mainly on use of mobile money, which was actually drawn from the different kinds of existing fintech which are used in promoting financial inclusion. The study did not actually use or did not factor in the use of mobile banking or internet banking, but basically mobile handsets, which have mobile money accounts. So future studies could actually factor in those other kind of platforms. And then also, of course, obtaining data was some kind of a challenge because individuals, first of all, could not be available to physically meet the research assistants. So because of issue of social distancing and then issue of lockdown, curfew, the hours when people should be indoors, also somehow in a way was an obstacle in this study. And then of course, the methodology, we adopted the cross-sectional kind of study, which was basically quantitative. So we could not manage because of the COVID situation to do some kind of in-depth analysis through an interview with the users and the mobile money service providers, the agents. So basically, that was what we went through. And this marks the end of my presentation. I would like to acknowledge Makerere University Research and Innovation Fund, and then the government of Uganda, which is working actually to support researchers to achieve, actually to provide cross-cutting findings to boost the national plan, the National Development Plan 3. This is really very critical. This has never happened in the history of Uganda. So researchers like ourselves were really very happy to receive such a grant, which was very timely, and this made this kind of findings to come out. And we'd also like to thank the chairman, Professor William Bazil, and the team, which is at RIF. They have really been very wonderful and very, very supportive toward the success of this fund. And of course, I would like to thank Makerere University Business School, which has always created some kind of good environment, very perfect environment for research. And this can really be visible from this kind of work which we've done. And then also I would like to thank the team, which composed of my principal, Professor Waswa Balunya, and the Dean of Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research, Muhammad Goma, and then Joseph Ntai and Edith Basarirwa. These were the team members that made this study a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed, and let me give an applause to you, George, for such an exciting presentation. So absolutely interesting, spot on, and presented so clearly, easy to follow, and all the way interesting aspects of this innovative work. And the work is definitely a strongly motivated paper dealing with this innovation of contactless digital financial inclusion. It addresses a very interesting and contemporary challenge to do with the COVID-19. And the second also, there is a plausible research methodology that is invoked here. The combination of finance and psychology is particularly interesting. And the leaning towards behavioral finance, I think, is a very important innovation we get in this setting. You could argue that there is actually a theory of change, as always done in experimental work, whereby you are looking at COVID-19 striking, and then the change in behavior of individuals and the affinity now towards using contactless digital instruments. And this is particularly important given that it's a way of saving a situation that would have not been possible without the use of mobile technology. And there is also very interesting evidence which has been presented in a way that shows the use of statistics to be able to interrogate the data obtained and arrive at a new evidence. And what was interesting as well in your presentation was the very timely, and I should say constructive, recommendations you offer for policy and practice, including, incidentally, your timely comment for Bank of Uganda. And I think this is the usefulness of research, to kind of shed a little bit of light and pique the interest of policymakers and practitioners. And let me also add that it was interesting that you presented some limitations of the study. You didn't want to sanctify the study. You are modest enough not to sanctify the study and say there are some limitations of this study, and indeed, of course, some aspects that could be done otherwise if, say, interviews of other instruments were used. And most importantly, also the acknowledgement of the team that are behind this work. So here is an interesting piece of work. It is work in progress. I would like to ask colleagues and the participants in this seminar to be very generous indeed, to be very generous with their comments, observations, which will help George and his team to actually now look at the work and see how they can improve it before the final dissemination, either in a journal or some other form that would get across the world communicating what has been researched, the science behind it, the change in the behavior of individuals, and the recommendations for policies. So please be generous with your comments. If you like to comment, please put up your hand and I can pick that from the chat once. There is a raise hand signal at the top in the right-hand corner of the screen, if your screen is structured like mine. And also you can post your comments in the chat room. Okay, so let me call upon you to be generous with your comments. Who is going first? I cannot see any comment so far. Any hand raised? Any hand raised so far?
There was a comment from Juliet.
Yes, okay. Okay, Juliet, I can see your hand up now. It's good. It's good. Okay, so I can see two hands. Yeah, one from there's Juliet, then Deputy Governor Michael Atingi, and then Richard. So let me start with the Juliet, who is a very energetic doctoral researcher in the department. Juliet, please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor. And I just want to say thank you, George, for that presentation. I thought it was quite insightful and interesting. Just one question, please, that I had for you. It was around where you mentioned the, I think, Generation Y in terms of education as well. And I wanted to understand, did you say Generation Y were more educated and so therefore they were more used to using the mobile money or mobile technology? Because then my challenge would be, for that generation, that young generation, was it really because they were educated, or was it because they were just copycat and that was the trend anyway? And so if it is, then maybe education is not really consequential in terms of a pandemic, because we tend to follow each other. What's this one doing? What's that one doing? So we tend to follow that crowd. So I'm just wondering whether that was a consideration from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. Do you want to make a quick response to this, George?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Julie. It's a good observation. Yeah, what we discovered from this study is basically that first of all, we did not try to mix generation and education, but what we were actually trying to investigate is to look at the different characteristics of individuals towards adoption and use of this kind of technology. You could clearly see that during our study, the level of education came in because we could clearly see that the number of people who use mobile money were actually people who are not more educated. Actually, the number of people who used more mobile money most were the people who are educated. And people with low education or no education did not, in a way, they use mobile money more than these other cohorts. Now, what we thought was that when you look at the adoption of technology and then the use of mobile phones, which comes in probably in Uganda, it's not translated. It's most of the mobile money menu is written in English. So this creates some kind of difficulty among this category of people to actually adopt and use mobile money. However, when you look at it from the generational perspective, you find that, of course, at this current moment or within the 21st century or the 20th century, majority of the new generation have gone to school. People have learned to take children to school. Now, through that, they can navigate or easily take on or use mobile, what we call new technology, as compared to individuals who are from the other cohorts. So definitely you would find that somebody who is between the age of 26 to 33 can easily get answered probably and then navigate more freely than somebody who is a baby boomer. So basically you can clearly see that people who are within the generation Y, who are between the age of 26 and 33, can easily navigate the menu, and this prompts them to actually adventure more into use of mobile money, because these are some kind of platform that is available used over the mobile phone. And that also implies that there are households who actually use mobile money, who could be using mobile money through this kind of cohorts. So probably it could be explained by different kind of scenario. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, George. And I know Juliet might have some follow-up questions. She's also a senior official of the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. She might want to delve into those issues of regulating institutions that somehow auxiliary to the mobile money legislation. So let's go back to, we now take, so I have three lined up. So let me take Dr. Michael Ating Ego, Deputy Governor, Bank of Uganda. And after that, I come to you, Dr. Richard Alexander, and then Dr. Thomas Bwire in that order. So Deputy Governor, please.
Thank you so much, Victor, for this opportunity, and a big congratulations to George for that excellent presentation. When this notice went out some time back, I said, whatever the case, I will have to spare some time to listen to this presentation because, like you say, it's a contemporary issue in settlement banking, at least to the best of my knowledge. So, George, I want to thank you for this presentation, and I want to highlight three key issues that what I consider value added that you have put into this presentation. One, I have been reading so many reports regarding this mobile money financial inclusion, but they're all surveys. You just get a questionnaire and then you send it to people there and you get the results. But the value added about this one is that it is giving us something that is analytically underpinned. So in that case, it becomes helpful in terms of policy formulation and monitoring, because you have something that is data driven, something that has been derived out of data. So you have a basis of saying, okay, I think with the data here, I think we have a case. Because once you send a questionnaire and you get responses, sometimes it's okay, how firm is this thing here? But let me thank you for that aspect there. And then, Victor, the second thing you mentioned is the theory of change, the COVID-19. I mean, this is, you know, there are pandemics, but this pandemic has come with opportunities. So I think the challenge that we have right now as policymakers and as researchers is how do we take the opportunity presented by COVID-19? Like Georgia has correctly mentioned, that we saw a huge jump in the use of the payment system as a result of COVID-19 for the various reasons that he gave. Now, to me, the challenge is how do we sustain this going forward? COVID-19 or no COVID-19, how do we sustain this going forward? To me, it's been proved that it is actually possible, all right, to increase financial, to increase digital financial services. So the challenge that we need to put our heads together is how do we sustain this going forward? And I think it can be sustained going forward. And this now goes into my third point, that the regulatory environment that has been so lacking in Uganda for the last decade is now in place. In sometime, I think in August, September last year, the National Payment System Law was enacted. And then sometime in March this year, we also gazetted 3 regulations. That is the National Payment System Regulations, the National Payment System Agents Regulation, and the National Payment Systems for Sandbox Regulation. And to me, these are the game changers. And that's why I like to interact with researchers to see how can we take advantage of all these developments to ensure that we sustain this going forward. Now, George, you mentioned one thing, and that's where I really want us to, this is where my comments are going to be. This is to do with the bottom of the pyramid. You know, if we have got to make a breakthrough in this, we need to see how we can crowd in the bottom of the pyramid. These guys in the rural areas, these guys who are doing all kinds of informal activities. How do we crowd them in? And I think this way we need to put our heads together with the our researchers. Right now, if you look at what's happening to the households, all right, the common form of usage of the digital financial services is through remittances. All right. Now, if you look at the other percentages beyond remittances, things like savings, things like lending, things like insurance, they're totally absent. So you need to ask yourself, why are they totally absent? Let me just make an observation. At the onset of COVID-19, a survey was done, and it was found that 52% of the 52% of the households in Uganda could not survive 1 day lockdown. All right, because these are hand-to-mouth people. So when you lock down the economy, you have basically cut off these guys' livelihoods. All right, and then they went ahead and said 82% of these could not survive 2 weeks. All right, because their coping mechanism is completely limited. Now, George, the issue here is it is because of lack of access to finance that these guys cannot have the basic coping mechanisms. They cannot really have any ways to fall through. So I think in terms of research, we need to ask ourselves, how can we crowd in these guys who have got limitations in terms of getting substitutes, coping mechanisms, and what have you? So I think what I'm just trying to say now is we need to look at the digital financial characteristics of these people at the bottom of the pyramid. How are they, and what are the findings that we are getting from them? Because if we are going to grow digital finances in Uganda, the educated are so limited that you'll soon actually taper off. All right, because but if you have got to grow the digital finances, you need to get in the bottom of the pyramid who are currently not using these services. So I think the research should try to look at what are the aspects, what are the characteristics of these digital financial services that address the issues of the bottom of the pyramid, and what are the kind of policy issues that we need to put in place to crowd these guys if we have to grow this thing here. And that's why I like this thing here, because it is a research that's going to inform policy making. So, Victor, if you may allow me, let me comment quickly on some of the observations made by George. The conduct of the pre-call analysis, I think I've already accommodated that one, but I needed him to come out clearly. How is it informing policy? Apart from fiscal policy, the taxation. Yes, I agree it is a problem, but I need to have it an empirical. Give me a counterfactual that in the absence of taxation, all right, the digital financial services would have been much, much, much higher than what it is now. I need a counterfactual, all right, because being a regulator of these services, all right, I'm not in the in the taxation business, all right? I'm just to ensure that the system is stable, all right? If you give me something empirical, counterfactual, then I could bring such a point forward to the Ministry of Finance that you have the evidence that if you drop the taxes, right, this is how the services are going to grow. So give me something empirical to do with the dropping of the taxes. And then the other one is, yes, I agree with you on the issue of education. But again, this education can be limited only to a few. But so I agree that what we need to do is to increase public awareness. And this public awareness has got to target the bottom of the pyramid. And your proposal of using local languages in promoting this is really a step in the right direction. At the Bank of Uganda, and together with the supervised financial institutions, we are trying to come with a strategy on how we can increase public awareness exactly by doing what you're trying to say. How can we use the local languages? And then the issue that I don't know whether you mentioned it, but I didn't hear anything to do with the cost of these financial services. To us, that is a very, very important thing, that the cost is is a serious issue, and that's why we're trying to expedite the national switch project to address the interoperability challenges that most of the providers are now facing, and we believe that by so doing, that the costs will be reduced. And then the other issue of data that you mentioned, yes, it is a big issue. And again, as a regulator, we are trying to develop what we call the big data framework to support access to high frequency data on digital financial services, including the digital credits and what have you. So because now we are regulating all these institutions, all right, that are in the business of the digital financial services, we are going to have access to this data. And we want to see to what extent this data can be used to promote research such as yours that can actually help inform policy making. So I agree with you that data needs to be addressed. And then, of course, there are also certain legal and regulatory and supervisory issues to deal with the amendments of the existing laws, again, to introduce the agency banking, some of the tier institutions. And we believe that once you do that, you are likely to hit the bottom of the pyramid, and is one way that you can actually bring education to the guys at the bottom of the pyramid. But most importantly, Victor, the issue is, how do we operationalize the financial innovation unit and the regulatory sandboxes? To me, once we operationalize these regulatory sandboxes, and that's why part of the implementing regulations have specifically addressed the sandboxes. Because if you have a control environment where you are going to look at the applications that are going to be delivered in the system to address the bottom of the pyramid, then we can begin to meaningfully discuss the thing here. But we also need to be informed by research so that we prioritize what kind of sandboxes that we are trying to put in place, if I've got it. So Victor, in the interest of time, let me leave it there, but it's something I need to follow up with George. This is a very interesting paper. I thank you so much, Victor.
Absolutely interesting and a very, very valuable commentary, Michael. First of all, thank you so much for appreciating the value-added element of George's research, George and his team, and especially the kind words you gave about the analytical pinnings of the work, data-driven aspects of the work. And the question he posed. Before I ask George to respond, let me so appreciate Deputy Governor for opening the frontier for the next piece of research that George and his team, including SOAS if necessary, can embark on to try to see how to crowd in the households and businesses, not only households, but also businesses at the bottom of the pyramid by capturing the characteristics and then adding this into the dimension. Absolutely, I think this is what is referred to as demand-driven research, where demand is the policy-driven research, where the policymakers create the demand for the research rather than the supply-driven research. So that demand-driven research of the components of Michael's comments are very much appreciated, including, of course, how do you generate a counterfactual? And I have a plausible answer. You undertake simulations so that you have experiment simulations 1, 2, 3. If you invoke this, this is what happens. If you drop the taxes to 0, this is what happens. And then those counterfactuals help you to a decision maker to make the decision to say, I take package 1 rather than take package 4. And also, of course, in increasing awareness, you mentioned big data. So these policy-driven type of research that the Deputy Governor mentions, absolutely helpful. I know you also mentioned the cost, and I know that Madame Grace Chiokunda of the African Development Bank is somewhere, but she's in the field. She may not be able to get enough coverage of the network to participate. But this is a question that, again, we can take up with the Madame Chiokunda in terms of the costs and supporting some of these, especially heavy big data type of research. And you ended, Michael, with the how do we operationalize the regulatory sandboxes? In the audience, we have a very active researcher by the name of Timios, who spent a lot of time working on regulatory sandboxes. He may come in, if possible, at a later stage. But thanks very much, Deputy Governor, for those constructive comments and also raising some research questions. Let me see whether George wants to add a reaction to the comments from the DG.
Yes, thank you very much, Victor. I would like to actually send my sincere gratitude to the Deputy Governor for attending this kind of seminar. I'm really honored. You see, we miss opportunity to meet people like him. Now, this is the platform where I can actually grab him and meet him. Now, I'm really very honored. You know, first of all, Deputy Governor, we have a very big gap between the researchers and institutions like yours, and actually the government structures, because we've done actually very many informative research that can actually provide a leeway to policy. Now, honestly, it's a two-way kind of sharing, because you've already created for us another platform, and I'm going to actually set. I'm going to, after this call, I'm going to write an abstract on this new concept that you've given me. We want to actually see what are some of the issues concerning the digital financial characteristic that can fit or which cannot fit within the unbanked bottom of the pyramid individuals. So this can actually provide us with a very good feedback. I would like to thank you for that comment. And then I would like to let you know that since you will get in touch with me, I have we shall share a document that was already published in one of the journals where we're trying to look at the effect of mobile money taxes. You will find that one of the facts which is actually available is that people used to use mobile money to pay school fees for the children when they are going back to school. So when that tax of 1% was introduced by the parliament, the number of actually, first of all, the volume of transaction drastically dropped. Then secondly, even the value in terms of money drastically dropped. And you could actually verify this by checking on when the government had to cut the taxes to 0.5. So that would be an anchor to see what could have happened within the population if when the government slashed the cost to 0.5, you see. And then another indicator could be when during the COVID time, when the mobile money operators had to scrap off mobile money fees on actually on deposit. When you could send money, you could send money for free, and somebody who was withdrawing could actually be charged a certain amount of fee. So this could really be some kind of a clear indicator that you could use as an anchor to see the effect of taxes, and then which could actually drive these mobile money network operators to charge certain fees. So basically, this is available, and it's counterfactual, which I can share with you, and we'll have a publication on this. And then also the issue of digital education. You will find that the biggest challenge which we faced within Uganda is that most of the formal activities in Uganda is described in the national language, which is English. So, which means the people who cannot speak or write English are automatically excluded. So how do we bring them on board, including especially the BOPs? We need to look into how do we try to package this kind of platform to have what we call to integrate certain kind of translation into the local languages so that more of these people are included. And then you talked about the issue of cost. Of course, when you look at cost is still something which is a big issue when you're trying to to use the digital platform. And this comes, I'm not quite sure what the regulators say about cost, but this could be linked to, because I am not sure whether the regulators are always, if the mobile money network operators are going to change fees, do they really actually consult with the regulators before changing of the fees? And then, do they also interact with the users of these services before they abruptly adjust these fees? So all these, if there's some kind of interaction between or coordination between the different stakeholders, then the bottom line of the issue can actually be realized. So briefly, these are some of the feedback that I can share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George, for also that positive reaction and appreciation of the comments from Deputy Governor. So I'll now take on, invite Richard, Dr. Richard Alexander of the Center for Global Finance and School of Finance and Management. Richard.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, George. Thank you so much for, even by the standards of the Center for Global Finance, a very exciting presentation. And I'm very grateful to Deputy Governor Atingiego for the interest and engagement of the central bank. The reason I found it so exciting is because you emphasized the contagious nature of COVID-19. And COVID-19 is the highest profile contagious disease, but it is by no means the only one. And there are other equally serious, even more lethal contagious diseases that have had epidemics not so far from Uganda. So it occurs to me, if working with the central bank, you can work out how to get the regulation right, how to make it more accessible to a wider group of the population, how to make it attractive, and there are regulatory tools that can encourage financial services providers, mobile money providers to do certain things. If you can do that, Uganda could be a model. And Uganda could be a model to other developing countries that have other contagious diseases that have dropped out of the headlines because of COVID-19. While at the same time, we're getting sharp reminders from around the world that COVID-19 itself hasn't gone away. So I think I don't have a question, but my comment, George, is that if you and the Bank of Uganda, working with other researchers and other scholars, work out a framework for this to work even better to reach a wider demographic, then that provides a very exciting model globally, not just for Uganda.
Oh, thanks so much, Richard, for those very affirmative comments and suggestions. I like in particular your observation that Uganda could be a model. I agree, indeed. That's quite possible. So, George, do you have anything to add to those comments and suggestions, observations by Richard?
I would just like to thank Richard for the compliments, and then also the comments that he has just given as his closing remarks. Yeah, we need to, or probably this kind of platform can help researchers like myself and other scholars who are within the country to actually team up with the central bank through the team from the central bank. The beauty with it is that we have the deputy governor in this attendance. So some kind of a team can be set up to try to investigate more into this kind of scenario. And then this could be actually designed into some kind of model that can be replicated by other countries, including even the developed countries, because you will find that the contactless digital financial services cuts across the globe. So I pray that I will get into contact with the deputy governor, and then we can see how we can move this forward. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you indeed. Now, let me have the pleasure of calling upon Dr. Thomas Bwile, who is also a Bank of Uganda, but also a Commercial Monetary Institute. Of course, Thomas is not a stranger to this audience, the CGF Seminar Series, having himself presented these seminars and also having himself spent some time in the Center for Global Finance at SOAS as a visiting researcher on one of the ongoing projects. So, Thomas, you are welcome.
Thank you, Victor. Although I'm in quite a rare place, but bear with me.
Well, that's fine, as long as we get your comments. Brilliant stuff.
This is the beauty of working virtually.
It means you are trying well to join us, which is good. Yeah.
So I join everybody to really thank George. Like Deputy Governor said, you know, George is moving a notch higher from the ordinary oratory. These things work this way too. Really pinning down issues using the hard data. And I think on that angle, we really thank him for that. Did I also hear him mention that Makerere offers a very, very spacious environment for research? He made me think like I should book my return so that. That said, now let me turn to the policy part of this discussion. Of course, my deputy governor has done a lot of justice. In fact, I wondered why, Victor, you chose my boss to speak first. You know, sometimes you don't have to repeat what he has said. Those are the facts. So I will not go into what I intended to go into because they've already been covered. But just a few additional things. I will begin with a simple question. George, could you have found some surprises in terms of results? Or we could take them as confirmations. The reason I'm asking that is, you know, within the sub-Saharan Africa, I think in terms of mobile money, the spectrum within which you're looking at financial inclusion, I think Uganda is again a notch higher. It's among those leaders. And I know that the population accessing mobile money services as of 2017 stands at some 50.6%, having risen from about 35% in 2014. And you know, these averages surpass sub-Saharan Africa as a whole. And it is over tenfold what the world has. Now, that takes me to a fundamental issue. And the fundamental issue is, when you look at financial inclusion vis-a-vis COVID, or in the face of COVID, could it be, in your assessment, that possibly financial inclusion was accelerated or it decelerated? Now, I'm asking that question for a very simple reason. I know in my assessment, I could look at COVID-19 as having had a double sword on financial inclusion. On one hand, we saw the pace of financial inclusion increasing almost globally everywhere. Reason being that given the slowdown in economic activity and eventually the loss of jobs by the most vulnerable of the populations, states used financial inclusion to reach out to the masses by doing the cash transfers Possibly this may not have happened in Uganda, but I know it has happened elsewhere. So in that aspect, therefore, we see financial inclusion being encouraged. But on the other hand, we also know that that loss of jobs, employment, led to loss of financial muscle, and also given a raft of public health measures that were instituted, we had a reduction in financial interactions, in-person interactions. So in that way, we see financial inclusion being affected badly by virtue of COVID-19. And then we also see that policymakers almost across the globe did encourage cashless payments. We saw in some countries where regulators even had to cut on the transaction costs for the sake of ensuring that people have access to the necessary finances and be able to go through this strange period. That's why I'm asking, from your perspective, could it be that financial inclusion lowered or it increased during the COVID-19? That would give me a perspective, and I will be able to pin down most of the findings that you have, perhaps to the status quo. Now, the last thing I want to also just briefly talk about is the idea of cost. My deputy governor is talking about counterfunction. Like he mentioned, the issue of taxes, his work is to keep the money. That's a physical thing. But you also mentioned that as of yesterday, quite a number of mobile money service providers are now under the umbrella of the Bank of Uganda, which is news. Now, that brings in the aspect of transaction costs. If transaction costs are an impediment, and the deputy governor, you have seen that during the pandemic, the regulators of these services scrapped those transaction costs. And many people were able to access these resources. So in principle, George is saying, well, since this thing is under your control, can we go along those lines that these transaction costs are kept at minimum as a way of encouraging more of financial inclusion? I think something along those lines.
Thank you, Thomas, for those observations, very rich comments and suggestions indeed, and also for putting your finger on the question of transaction costs, which may be of two groups. The transaction costs which may arise from just simply the pecuniary way of the business is done, but there could also be transaction costs that are accrued via a levy or any fees or any charge or any tax on transactions. So I think those are very interesting aspects to explore. But let me ask George to weigh in with the appreciation of the comments and responding to some of these observations.
Yes, thank you very much, Victor. I would like to thank Thomas for the constructive comments and also some useful observation. When you look at, he asked me about what could be some of the surprises that we found during this study. Between me and you, I think finance, this cuts across all the different disciplines. It proves to some of us that there is what we call a mixture. A mixture of discipline can actually better explain some of these scenarios that we live with in the world. Now, when you look from our findings, you find that when you try to bring in the psychological kind of aspect of a human being, you find that, of course, when people are exposed to different kind of what we could say, different kind of scenario within the environment, you find that it affects individuals first. Now, what would be the reaction of the individual? Now, from our study, this element of what we call emotions, you know, people, when you talk of emotion, most of us think that it's only negative emotion. Now, through this study, we found out that some kind of positive emotions comes out to preempt human beings to behave in certain ways. And one of the ways that we discovered was that when man is faced with certain kind of catastrophe, they tend to behave in a certain way to find solution quicker than used by themselves. So we found that because international health institutions like the World Health Organization introduced the SOPs, and some of the SOPs were it actually pushed individuals to the wall. Now, what were the best solution to this? Now, as far as finance is concerned, you'll find that people quickly decided to have some kind of affection and feeling towards the use of mobile money. You'll find that the positive emotions of individuals actually increased financial inclusion by 2.8% from this survey. So through that, you can clearly see that a blend of finance and psychology, which determines certain kind of behavior, was really visible from this kind of findings. That actually brings out some kind of uniqueness in the findings from the study. And then also, you bring out a very, very, very good point by trying to see that you would think that financial inclusion was double kind of sword, where there would be some kind of a deceleration and acceleration. Of course, when you look at the lockdown scenarios, most of the bank branches were closed down. Then there was no some kind of access of financial services from the branches and all that, and then the main banks branches. So from that, you could clearly see that there was a reduction of, okay, the banks were closed down, so operation was actually closed down. So there would be customers who would transact through the banks migrated to the use of digital platforms like mobile money. So you could clearly see that this brings into perspective to policy that a blend of different channels can actually promote financial inclusion. So this is something which is a point of reference, that when you close down banks at the branches or businesses, what could be the available channel? So mobile money could actually offer some kind of alternatives to the existing bank branches, which actually attracted physical accessibility of financial services. And then also, you were asking about issue of, you talked about issue of cash, the cash transfers. Between me and you, I would like to give you a typical scenario of what happened in Uganda during the COVID time. You find that probably before COVID time, the donors, for example, I'm going to give you the example from the perspective of the donors. So the donors who are operating within the refugee camps in Uganda were already trying to pilot the use of mobile money in remitting what we call humanitarian support through e-vouchers, where individuals in the camps, like the lactating mothers, would use their mobile phones or to access food from the vendors. So you could actually clearly see that this kind of pilot would have been scaled up at the onset of coronavirus, because of course with the lockdowns and then the poor road network in Uganda, some of these donors would have actually increased the level of cash transfer through remittances on the mobile phones for this category of refugees. So when you look at all these kind of scenario, it really takes us down to be so actually down to sit down and really try to actually dissect this issue of financial inclusion by comparing the physical bank, the physical bank branch presence vis-a-vis the use of digital platforms like the mobile money. So briefly, that is what I can say as far as Thomas's concerns were. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George, for those points of reaction, and appreciate those comments. I think Deputy Governor wants to come back. So, Michael, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Victor. And yes, I'm back on the issue of costs. Yes, George, you are right that there is already some bit of counterfactual, which was indicated by the reduced transaction volumes and values when immediately those taxes were introduced and led the government to lower those taxes at the end of it. But George, I think to really present a well thought out case on this and to strengthen the business case for negotiating with the Minister of Finance, let's be very realistic here. Lots of things have since happened following the introduction of those taxes. One, you are talking about the health benefits that the use of digital financials brought following the onset of the pandemic versus the fees. I mean, look, suppose the mobile money companies and government had not really reduced these fees here, would have the population, all right, completely continue using money even when the transmission of COVID was proven to be through cash and what have you, all right? And ever since the reintroduction of the charges, but at a slightly lower rate, we've since seen transaction volumes and values pick up significantly. All right, so that's one thing. And then secondly, the issue of the health benefits that came with COVID has created a behavioral change in the population. All right, so even after that, all right, remember that most mobile money companies again reintroduce those charges. All right, the P2P, the cashing out. All right, they reintroduce those charges, but we still see the things grow, increase. All right, so I think in your counterfactual, I want you to bring up the following. One, if we were to reduce the interoperability costs, all right, from where they are right now, what would be the impact of that in terms of the transaction values and volumes maybe? Then there's some costs that are associated with the regulations. Remember, we didn't have a regulatory environment before. We had no law in place, but now we have a law in place that is bringing so many players on board and therefore increasing the competition, which on its own is going to lower the costs. All right. So when you are doing that counterfactual, I want you to bring in all those factors: the reduced regulatory costs, and because of the laws that, in place, the reduced interoperability cost because of what we are now trying to address, and then the benefits that came from COVID itself. All right, that would a taxation continue to constrain the thing here, and then finally, you also need then to bring all those things together in your analysis so that you have the very scenario like Victor said, that if you look at scenario 1, this is the impact, scenario 2, this is the impact, scenario 4, this is the impact. So you need to be holistic, have an open mind about this. All right, because if you're already saying that, look, we lowered costs during the pandemic, and therefore the transactions went up. When you increase the taxes, the transactions came down. My argument is that lots of things have changed. Bring in all the things that have changed that contribute towards the lowering of the costs, and see whether the marginal changes that could work positively might actually offset the aspect of what? Of the taxation. So if you can prove that the taxation is still overwhelming all those changes that have a positive impact on the cost, then maybe you will have a case. All right. But if those changes that are being introduced are more than offsetting, all right, the marginal impact of taxation, then you're going to have a very difficult case. So I'm looking for that kind of analysis. I thank you, Victor.
Thank you very much, Michael, for those additional explanatory explanations you've offered. I think it makes it even much more richer. The need to strike, a good balance and to weigh in what is possible and what is not possible, to be able to inform quite decisively the policymakers about the options and the advantages of those options vis-a-vis the other non-viable alternatives. So maybe George, you could react to the comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. What we must appreciate is that my deputy governor, we must appreciate that COVID exposed a lot of weaknesses in regulations in low developed countries. Between me and you, we must also appreciate that this kind of scenario has never happened, where you're locked down and you have no option. So I must say personally that I was forced to use mobile money. I had no option. So we must begin to agree that certain situations can expose our weaknesses. Between me and you, the taxes actually, one thing I want to appreciate from you is that if we can factor in the issue of taxes into this kind of study, and then we try to see the kind of effect it can actually present. But we must appreciate that also, what are the different available channels for access to, okay, that can promote financial inclusion. One of them is that we have the formal arm of the financial sector, and then the informal arms of the financial sector. Now, those are probably the available channels. So what we are trying to see here is that apart from the formal system, like the banking system, which is physically, the conventional availability of the traditional banking system, what could be the other available alternatives where people can access financial services from, irrespective of the taxes? Between me and you, you will find that even the taxes alone, you got people in my country, Uganda, very well, people are actually bandwagon driven. And I'm honestly telling you that even when the lockdown was lifted and then the fees started to be brought back by the mobile money companies, you will find that honestly the level of transaction went down because people were free to come out and walk to the grocery and look for money. People actually were free to look for airtime. Between me and you, you know very well that when you borrow airtime from these platforms, they only when you borrow once and you make different calls, you will find that you exhaust the money that you borrow in terms of airtime. So what do you do next? You see. So what I'm trying to explain here is that people are sometimes forced to consume these products because they don't have alternatives. Like, for example, in Uganda, we don't have credit cards. So a common man is forced to actually access these services using the most available channel, irrespective of the cost. So probably that could clearly bring into play that we must really look into issues of cost. And you clearly know that the issue of cost is the main barrier to access to financial services. So how do the regulators come in? For example, I've never seen any kind of communication from the central bank or Uganda Communication Commission that the mobile money network operators are going to change fees. These are the trends within this period. Consumers should expect this kind of trends. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a very big gap between the regulators and other stakeholders. Personally, I've gone through a lot, Deputy Governor. I failed to obtain data for this kind of research from the mobile network operators, even from the central bank. So we must agree that certain factors are limiting this kind of service delivery channels to actually lift people out of poverty by accessing these basic financial services, irrespective of the COVID scenario, which actually has exposed For me, I will be very open and frank with you. COVID has really exposed a lot of weaknesses in our country, in Uganda. So basically, this probably would help researchers and policy makers like you to come up together and try to strike a balance, to find a way to move forward, to make access to financial services actually better, especially for the bottom of the pyramid, kind of the unbanked population. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George, for those additional reaction. I see that we are drawing to the close of these 2 hours of excitement, discussion, exploration, framing the agenda for future research and research that resonates perfectly with the policy and practice. Before I close, let me take this opportunity to share with you some of the new work from the involving colleagues here and also in the large network of the Center for Global Finance. 2 books that coming. One book that was published this month, which is available. Let me see whether I can get. Yes. This is the book that was published this month from Oxford University Press, over 50 years of central banking in Kenya, edited by Patrick Njoroge, the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, and Victor Marina, who is speaking to you right now. There is quite a lot about mobile money, especially the experiences in Kenya, where the technology was invented from Kenya to the rest of the world. And some of the discussions that we have had on mobile money technology, all of these are captured in about a couple of chapters in this book. This is now available, can be acquired very quickly from Oxford University Press. And we'll be doing a series of book launches on this pretty soon. Let me also present another book. This is a book from this project on inclusive finance. It includes so many papers, much of it including on digital revolution, innovation, fintech, mobile money, and others. The book is forthcoming later in the year, will be available in about September, October on this year, with the title Inclusive Financial Development, from Edward Edgar Publishing, edited by Ahmad Hassan Ahmad, who is always and is already in this meeting, and Professor David Wedantalafumra and myself. So we'll put this on our website so that you can get all the details of these 2 books. So in conclusion, let me thank very profoundly George, who has presented a very fundamental piece of work that he generated together with his team at Makerere University. It's a great pleasure, George, to have you presenting. We have always had you participating in the seminars. And for some of us, we have had your interaction, especially in the US, and also when you visited SOAS. But today, we've had you deliver the gold standard equivalent of a paper. Thank you very much. And please take our best regards to your co-authors back at Makerere University for this excellent work. Let me also thank the policymakers here with us. I saw Madam Grace Chiokunda from African Development Bank, the Deputy Governor. Thank you so much. We know how valuable your time is, but that you could spare this time to be with us is very much appreciated. And also Dr. Bwire from your outputs. And all of you who have been able to join us today for this exciting seminar. For this academic year, we have 2 seminars remaining, and there would be one on business finance, and the last one will be on a subject which is related to George's heart, which would be entrepreneurship, finance and entrepreneurship, which will be the last seminar. And then we resume the seminars later in the academic year in September. When we start the academic year, we'll have a summer recess for most of the rest of June, July, August, and September. Come back with a lot of energy and with a lot of interesting papers that we have put together over the summer, and we'll be then having the seminars in October. Thank you indeed, and we could not make it without you guys sacrificing and make sure that we enjoy this kind of discussion. Thank you indeed, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Victor.